You all. Tonight we're going to continue with our study of Bhagavad Gita as it is by His Divine Grace, A.C.Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Tonight we're going from verses, we'll begin with verse 17 of chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Now, as we've mentioned previously, chapter 3 is entitled Karma Yoga. Karma Yoga refers to the art of action, how to act and connect one's actions with God, with Krishna. So this is the subject matter of this particular chapter. Tonight we will continue through from verse 17, and you'll see some famous verses from the Bhagavad Gita, which would be your key memory verses, which you'll need to memorize for your exam. So those verses are there, you can have a look. And if you have any questions or comments as we go, then please ask. So, tonight the theme is that Krishna will be speaking to Arjuna about setting the correct example for those who are following you. Each one of us is a leader in our own right. We lead someone, whether it's our children or our family members or some friends or at work, in our community. All of us are leaders in some capacity, and tonight Krishna will be speaking specifically about how to set an example, a correct example, and act dutifully as an example for others. So we'll read about that tonight. If you have any questions or comments as we go, then please ask. Verses 17 and 18. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who is satisfied in the self, only fully satiated, for him there is no duty. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living entity. So in the purport for verse 17, Prabhupada says, due to being fully satisfied by acts in Krishna consciousness, all impiety within is instantly cleansed, an effect of many, many thousands of Jaggi performances. Very powerful statement by Prabhupada that when one acts in Krishna consciousness, one feels automatically satisfied. And this is the theme of the Bhagavad Gita, one of the key themes, Param Drishtva Nivartate, that in order to give up lower things or to give up material desires and attachments within this world, one has to develop a higher taste, Param Drishtva, a superior pleasure by devotional activities, by spiritual devotional service, devotional activities. So when we do develop attraction and attachment to serving Krishna, and we have this higher taste, automatically one becomes satisfied within. And one receives the effect of performing thousands of Jaggi performances, which means one feels cleansed. One cleanses one's consciousness. That's the potency of devotional service, of acts performed for the pleasure of Krishna. So when we please Krishna, when we act for Krishna's pleasure, then automatically we will feel satisfied. We'll automatically feel satisfied in our service to Krishna, and we will give up our lower attachments in this material world. So in text 18, Prabhupada says within the purport, a self-realized person is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty except activities in Krishna consciousness. And then Prabhupada says, Krishna consciousness is not inactivity. A Krishna conscious person does not take shelter of any material person. So, once you perform devotional service, you feel so much satisfaction and high that one cannot remain inactive. You know, one must be active in. That is how a devotee meditates. That's how a devotee feels, right? A devotee wants to remain active in the service of Krishna. And by that activity in the service of Krishna, one feels a higher pleasure or a higher taste. So that is something we all need to work on within ourselves. We all have to develop this attachment to serving and pleasing Krishna, absorbing ourselves in devotional service. And when you do that, automatically, you'll lose your attachment to lesser material things. Okay, text number 19. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty, for by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. Prabhupada says in the purport, in the first paragraph, that a person acting for Krishna under proper guidance and without attachment to the result of the work is certainly making progress towards the supreme goal of life. This is perfect action of the highest degree, recommended by Krishna. This is the highest type of activity. The highest type of activity is to act for the pleasure of Krishna. When one acts for the pleasure of Krishna, one no longer has obligation to this material world. Factually speaking, that is what sannyas is about, the fourth order of the social system, right? When one becomes a sannyasi, when one enters onto that platform of sannyas, then at that point, one has no material obligation. Of course, if we're not quite on that platform, we still have some material obligation. We're still materially obliged to some degree. But for one who is fully surrendered to Krishna, on the platform of sannyas, he has no material obligation. One can just fully surrender to Krishna. Prabhupada further says, in the second paragraph of the purport, action in Krishna consciousness is transcendental to the reactions of good or evil work. A Krishna conscious person has no attachment for the result, but acts on behalf of Krishna alone. So we have no attachment to the result. This is a symptom, a sign of one advancing in Krishna consciousness. When you become advanced in Krishna consciousness, then you have no attachment to the result. In other words, you only do your service for one reason. Sometimes even in our service, we see devotees have motivation, right? Sometimes we hear devotees say, if we do this service, we will become purified. You know, we'll become cleansed. Even that, when you think like that, that is, you're still meditating on the benefit you will receive, right? Which is not the highest level of consciousness, right? It's good, but it's not the highest level of consciousness that one can have while doing service for Krishna. A higher level of consciousness is you just act without attachment to the result. In other words, you're just doing the service for the pleasure of the Vaishnavas, for the pleasure of Krishna. You're not doing it because you want to receive something in return. That's a material conception. Material conception is I'm doing it because I want to receive something. I want to make advancement or progress. But when you're truly in the mood of wanting to please and serve Krishna, you're not interested in your own satisfaction, but rather you just want to give pleasure to Krishna. You just want to serve on behalf of him. This is an actual higher mentality. So we should think like that. That I want to just serve. I don't want something in return. Or I don't want material benedictions. I don't even want spiritual benedictions necessarily, but I just want to please and serve Krishna and the Vaishnavas. Text number 20. Kings such as Janak attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that self-realized souls have no obligation to perform the prescribed duties in the Vedas. Nonetheless, they perform all prescribed activities just to set examples for the people in general. When one becomes very advanced in spiritual life, in Krishna consciousness, you're actually not obliged to perform material duties. But still, you may do it to set an example for others. Because you want to set the example, you want to help others become spiritually realized. Right? So because you want others to become spiritually realized, then because of that mentality of wanting others, then you'll set the example. Right? You'll do the correct thing, right, in service to Krishna, to set the example. So that is the mentality of someone who becomes more progressed in their Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada explains in the purport, for the right cause, there is a necessity for acting. Experienced persons in Krishna consciousness can act in such a way that others will follow. So we act to set the example. We want to set a proper example for others, right? And that's duty. That's why this section, we're hearing about the necessity of doing one's duty. So sometimes we have to do our duty. Sometimes we don't want to act in a particular way, but we're duty bound to act in that way. We have a duty to act in a particular way, to set an example for others. Right? And that's why it is important to understand one's obligation. Just like if someone has children, you have to act properly to set the example for your children. Right? That is your duty. So similarly, as a devotee, as a guru, as a devotee, you have to set the example for others. You have to act properly. Text 21. This is a famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Prabhupada says in the purport, one should follow in the footsteps of great devotees. And that is the way of progress on the path of spiritual realization. So, Prabhupada himself was a great devotee, a great Vaishnava. He set an example. He set an example. He showed us by his example how we should act in Krishna consciousness. Because he understood that if he acted in a particular way, then others would become. So we also have to act in that way so that others will become inspired. That's what it means to be a devotee, to be a leader in Krishna consciousness. One has to set the example for others. So, Prabhupada says in the purport, Lord Chaitanya said that a teacher should behave properly before he begins teaching. So this is called sadachar. There is achar and prachar. Prachar means what we speak. Achar means how we act. That's where we get the word acharya. Acharya means one who teaches by example. Teaches us how to please and serve Krishna. How do we please and serve Krishna? That's what the Acharya will teach. Right? What is the proper methodology? What are the proper actions? How to serve Krishna? That's why in the beginning of the 64 items of devotional service discussed by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says, Ado Guru Padashraya, because unless you have a guru, unless you have senior Vaishnavas to teach you how to serve Krishna, you won't know what to do. You won't know what is the proper methodology, how to please Krishna. You need to be taught by others who set the example. So as Prabhupada is pointing out, we need to have these authorities who can teach us, right, how to serve Krishna properly. So the people we follow are the people who act properly, right? Who by their inspiration, by their activities, they inspire us in devotional service. So one has to have proper speech, one has to speak properly and according to Shastra, one has to speak according to Vedic authority, but one also has to act on that speech. If you speak very nicely but you don't act, people will lose faith. If you act nicely but then you don't speak appropriately, people also lose faith. So a real authority, he has to do both. He has to speak properly and also act properly. Then one is qualified to become a guru when he has correct achar and prachar, both, when both are there. Prabhupada says in the purport, the revealed scriptures are considered to be the standard books followed by human society. Thus, the leaders' teaching should be based on the principles of such standard shastras. So we have this three-way checking point in Krishna consciousness. Guru, sadhu, and shastra. Right? The guru has to act according to the instructions of the shastra and the sadhus. Then he's qualified to be a guru. The sadhu must be following guru and acting according to shastra. And the shastra, everything written in the shastra has to be authorized by guru and Vaishnava, by the sadhus. So in this way, this is the checking system which is given. So we have to make sure that the guru, our authorities, are following the teachings properly. They don't speculate. They don't deviate from the teachings of the scriptures. That is the authority. That's how they become an authority. Prabhupada says also in the purport, the king, the father, and the school teacher are considered to be natural leaders of the innocent people in general. All such natural leaders have a great responsibility to their dependents. Therefore, they must be conversant with standard books of moral and spiritual codes. So if one takes an authority, it says within Bhagavatam, don't become a guru, don't become a teacher, don't become a parent, a father or a mother, don't become a brahmana, don't become a worshipable demigod unless you can deliver your dependence from the cycle of birth and death. Right? It's a very important point. We have to liberate our those who are following from the cycle of repeated birth and death. That is your authority, right? To become a guru or to become a teacher or any authority in the Vedic system, right? To become an authority, you have to be able to deliver your dependence from the cycle of birth and death. Otherwise, you don't have qualification. Just give me one moment. I'm just going to shut this curtain because the sun's going right in my eyes. I'll just be 1 second. Okay. Still hitting me in the eye a little bit. But the sun will move gradually. Okay. So, text number 22. O son of Prita, there is no work prescribed for me within all the 3 planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I a need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. So Krishna is now giving himself as an example. Prabhupada says in the purport that since everything is in full opulence in Krishna and is existing in full truth, there is no duty for Krishna to perform. And yet Krishna is engaged in duty. Although he is above all the regulations in the revealed scriptures, he does not do anything that violates the revealed scriptures. So this is an important point. That Krishna has no obligation to follow the rules of the scriptures, because the rules that are given within the scriptures for humanity are to liberate and purify humanity and to bring them to the spiritual platform. However, Krishna, being God, the Supreme Person, he doesn't have to follow any of the rules and regulations because he is already liberated. He is already adhokshaja. Adhokshaja means he is transcendental or above the effects of the material energy. So there's no need for him to follow everything, but still to set an example for us, he follows. So that means that we should also follow to set an example for others. We have a duty, we have an obligation to follow everything nicely in the revealed scriptures so that other people can become inspired and they will follow the right example themselves. So we all have that obligation. Even Krishna himself, just like you see in the pastimes of Krishna and in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In Krishna's pastimes, Krishna he accepts a guru. Sandipani Muni, right, is his guru, right? So he follows. Now, why does the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself need a guru? He doesn't, but he sets an example for us. Similarly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepts Ishwara Puri as his guru. Why? To set the example. That is what we need to do. Right? He is not obligated. We are obligated. But he sets the example. Yad yada chariti shtrestas. To show whatever action a great person performs, common people will follow. So God himself, the Supreme Personality, when he comes to the material world, he sets the example to show us what we should also do. Text number 23. For if I ever failed to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties or pata, certainly all men would follow my path. So, in the purport, Prabhupada says, in order to keep the balance of social tranquility for progress in spiritual life, there are traditional family usages meant for every civilized man. Although such rules are for conditioned souls and not Krishna, because he descended to establish the principles of religion, he followed the prescribed rules. Otherwise, common men would follow in his footsteps because he is the greatest authority. So this is the example that Krishna himself is setting, right? I am the authority. I'm the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I've come to this world, and now I must follow, right, the teachings of the Shastra, the teachings of the Scripture. Otherwise, other people will neglect. Right? In the Bhagavatam, it describes that in Kali Yuga, the people in Kali Yuga are lazy by nature. People are lazy. So any excuse they have to not follow something, they will accept that. Any opportunity that they have not to follow things properly in spiritual life, they will do it. So therefore, Krishna says that I set the example for them so that they will not have an excuse. They can say, well, Krishna did it, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did it, Prabhupada did it, all these great personalities did it, the previous acharyas, the Goswamis, I should also do it. Right? And that's why we need living gurus. That's why we need living acharyas who can set the example for us and show us the correct path of bhakti, of devotional service, how we should act in this material world. Okay. Text number 24. Krishna continues to speak about himself. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. So Prabhupada says in the purport that it is best that one not try to imitate the Ishwaras or those who can actually control the movements of the sun and moon, but simply follow their instructions. Those who want to imitate their acts are calling death very near. So people in Kali Yuga in particular, they like to break the regulative principles. So they will use any type of excuse or any example that they can see and misconstrue to justify their activities in this world. A kshatriya, a warrior, is allowed to have some regulated sense gratification. Just like the regulative principles are no meat eating, no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling. A kshatriya is allowed to break those four principles, but only in a regulated way, not just unlimitedly or freely. You know, like a kshatriya can eat meat. If he kills a tiger, then he can eat the flesh of the tiger in order to increase his own vitality, his own energy. But he can't just go and kill any animal and eat any animal. You know, he can have illicit sex in the sense that the maidservants of the queen, the kshatriya, the prince, can also unite with them. They're not technically married to him, but he can unite with them. He can have some extra sex life because to fulfill his passion. But if a child is born to the maidservants, an example is Vidura within the Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata. Vidura was born from a maidservant, but if the kshatriya has children, he must maintain the children of the maidservants, which is a common practice amongst the princely class. And then intoxication, you know, they can have some intoxication on occasion, but not freely and all the time. And gambling, we see in the Mahabharata the example of the gambling match. You know, they can gamble a little bit, but they cannot become addicted to it. So many people in Kali Yuga, they see that these great personalities are doing these things, and then they say, well, we can do them also. But no, you're not performing the other activities that these great personalities are performing. So if you can do the activities that they're doing, then you can maybe also perform some of these activities also. Otherwise, it is not permitted. It is not permitted. One has to follow properly. Prabhupada says in the purport that when Krishna descends, naturally he deals with such rules to maintain the prestige and necessity of such performances. The Lord is the father of all living entities. And if the living entities are misguided, indirectly the responsibility goes to the Lord. Therefore, whenever there is a disregard of regulative principles, the Lord himself descends and corrects the society. Krishna says in the 4th chapter, which will be the next chapter, Krishna says, he appears whenever there is a decline in religious principles. And people say, well, right now there is a decline in the religious principles. That's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advented so recently in Kali Yuga to correct the improprieties. And Lord Chaitanya, he appeared to rectify things, and he also sends the holy name in Kali Yuga. Kali Kali Nama Rupe Krishna Avatar, the incarnation of Krishna. Sometimes people say, where is Krishna? The incarnation of Krishna in the age of Kali is the holy name. So Krishna appears to rectify the impurities through the chanting of the holy name in the Kali Yuga. Text number 25. As the ignorant perform their duties with attachment to results, the learned must similarly act, but without attachment. for the sake of leading people on the right path. So Prabhupada says in the purport that the Krishna conscious person is required to show the people how to act and how to engage the results of action for the purpose of Krishna consciousness. So this is the theme of this section, right? We must do our duty. We must act properly on behalf of Krishna, set the example, right? So that others will stay on the right path. If we don't set the example properly, others will deviate, right? People in Kali Yuga find it very difficult to follow the regulative principles. They find it difficult to chant rounds a day. They find it difficult to perform devotional activities. So we have to set the example so they become inspired, so they can also become inspired to follow. Okay, so now text number 26. Krishna will, in this next section, Krishna will speak about how we should perform our duty without attachment, to set an example for others. Text number 26. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant people attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada says in the purport that a self-realized soul in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities or understanding, but he should act by showing them the results of all work, by showing them how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. So spiritual life doesn't mean giving things up unnecessarily. That's not spiritual life. Spiritual life doesn't mean you just stop activities or you just stop you don't act like, you don't just give up material activities and just go into like a state of meditation or something. Rather, you act in the service of Krishna. Prabhupada says in the purport, all rituals, all sacrifices, everything in the Vedas, including all direction for material activities, are meant for understanding Krishna, who is the ultimate goal of life. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end. But through fruitive activities and sense gratification, regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness. And then Prabhupada says, although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of Krishna without waiting for other Vedic formulas. So those who are too attached to the material energy, we don't disturb them, but we try to give them opportunities to engage in Krishna service. So we distribute prasadam, we distribute the holy name, we distribute Prabhupada's books, right? Because most people, they're not qualified to take to devotional service at this point in time. So what do? In order to help them, because they're not qualified to take to devotional service at this point, We give them opportunities to perform agyata sukriti, unknown devotional activities, to gradually purify and elevate them so that they can take to devotional service in the future. So we don't disturb their minds, but we just try to add Krishna into their lives in order to attract them to Krishna. Text number 27. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. There's another famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says in the purport, a person in false ego does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature. Under the order of Krishna, and as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. So most people are so much bewildered. Vimuta. Vimuta means ass-like, very dull. Most people are so absorbed in their ego and understanding that they are the body, very difficult for them to understand spiritual life and take to devotional service. So we need, as devotees, we need to encourage people to take to devotional service, to take to spiritual life. Because most people are too bewildered. It's not easy for them. So it is not easy for people. So we just have to encourage them to take to spiritual life. Because so many people are just bewildered by their egos in this world. So many people are influenced by the modes of material nature that if you, just like it says, if you hit a snake, the snake will attack you. So in spiritual life, we're careful how we present Krishna consciousness. We don't want to disturb people's minds so that they become ignorant and attacking. Rather, we just want to encourage people to take to the platform or to the process of devotional service. Text number 28. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, O mighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work and devotion and work for fruitive results. So the purport, Prabhupada says, the knower of the absolute truth is convinced of his awkward position in material association. He therefore engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness and becomes naturally unattached to the activities of the material senses, which are all circumstantial and temporary. So, first of all, as Prabhupada says here, we have to become convinced of our awkward situation in the material association. We have to understand that there is no happiness in this material world. We have to develop a healthy pessimism for this material energy. We understand this material energy can't make us happy. It can't fully satisfy us. So a devotee develops a healthy pessimism. He's pessimistic. I don't want to engage in all of these activities. I want to engage in the service of Krishna. I don't want to be a materialistic person. So a devotee has to understand that his position in this material world is awkward. It's very awkward being in this material world. He has to become detached. He has to become convinced that he cannot enjoy in this material world separate from Krishna. Then you can actually advance properly in your Krishna consciousness. Text number 29. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Prabhupada says in the purport, those who are enlightened in spiritual life should not try to agitate materially engrossed persons. Better to prosecute one's own spiritual activities silently. Such bewildered persons may be engaged in such primary moral principles of life as nonviolence and similar materially benevolent work. So it's interesting actually, because you see there's so many hours of footage where Prabhupada is preaching to materialistic people, non-devotees. And particularly I noticed that when Prabhupada is presenting Krishna consciousness to when Prabhupada's presenting Krishna consciousness to Christian people, to priests and people following the Christian faith, what Prabhupada would emphasize is that they should become vegetarian. Stop killing animals. The Bible says, thou shalt not kill. Prabhupada would always speak on this point, right? He wouldn't try to give them higher knowledge because they were not ready for it. So Prabhupada would speak to them in such a way as in order to assist them to go to a higher level of consciousness. Text number 30. Or actually, I'll read from the purport of text 29. Prabhupada says, the devotees are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risks, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being. So devotees, they take all kinds of risks to bring people to Krishna, because so many people are suffering and they're lacking Krishna consciousness in their life. So a devotee tries to reach out and assist them to become Krishna conscious. Text number 30. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, and with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. Very beautiful instruction by Krishna. In the purport, Prabhupada says, one has to sacrifice everything for the goodwill of Krishna and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. We do not have to consider the order of the Lord. We have only to execute his order. So that is our duty. Our duty is just to assist others in becoming Krishna conscious. Set the example for others, right? Set the example and assist them and encourage them and preach to them to become Krishna conscious. But we should not disturb their minds. One time, the devotees were walking through the zoo with Prabhupada and they saw a lion. And devotees were throwing things at the lion. Prabhupada said, do not disturb him. Right? In a similar way, when we're dealing with the non-devotees, don't disturb them, but help them become Krishna conscious. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy, become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. So Prabhupada says in the purport that the injunction of Krishna is the essence of all Vedic wisdom, and therefore is eternally true without exception. One should have firm faith in this injunction without envying Krishna. So we just present what we have heard from Krishna, from our gurus, through parampara. We present that to others, right? We have to become expert in our presentation. Don't disturb others' minds, but just try to give them as much as they can in order to elevate them. And the final verse for tonight, text number 32. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. So Prabhupada says a disobedient person, however great he may be, is ignorant of his own self and of Krishna due to a vacant heart. Therefore, so for people on this platform, we do not disturb them. We set the example and we try to engage them in Krishna's service as much as we can, but we don't disturb the minds of the ignorant. So we'll stop here for tonight. Are there any questions, any comments on anything we discussed? Thank you all for coming. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you for coming.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you.